You know, when you start to hear a wisdom talk, oftentimes, at least for me, I manage to stay awake maybe the first 10 minutes and then I'm sort of gone. Or I'm really efforting with mindfulness to uh, bring myself back to attention. So just if it seems dry, just let the words flow through you and know that listening to the Dharma is one of the direct ways to freedom and that you're improving your mind stream. Just being here. And hopefully, I'm improving my mind stream by putting it together. So we have this blessing of being together to let the Dharma flow through. And what I wanted to talk about was one of the basic foundations of the three pillars of the Dharma. And there are, lots of lists since everything needed to be communicated through verbal transmission. One of the best ways to do it was chanting and quatrains and having some of them be lists. And so the three pillars of the Dharma, Dana, Sila, and Bhavana, in Pali, that the Buddha taught, he went around the Indian countryside teaching to a large variety of people. And just imagining all the different backgrounds that everyone came from, kings and queens and Brahmins and lay people and various others further down the caste system, which he pretty much systematically was ignoring and teaching the Dhamma to anyone who would listen and supportive of those that were of the non-dominant wealthy culture. And so these pillars of the Dhamma are really a bottom line way of living. There's three other pillars that we say when we chant the sharing of the blessing chant. May I soon attain the threefold bliss. So the threefold bliss is also Sila, or harmonious living, and Samadhi, which is concentration, meditative absorption, and Panya, wisdom, for reaching complete freedom from suffering, Nibbana. So, mentioning the second three that's in the sharing of the merit, maybe we'll recite that when we're finished, but I'm going to focus on the three, the ones easily developed and practiced in our daily flow of life. And these were taught by the Buddha in the order of generosity first as a way of life, and then Sila as the virtue or harmonious living, as a way to have peacefulness in one's community, and the reciprocity between monastics and lay people that was needed to support each other, living harmoniously. And then, after developing the foundation of a wholesome life, the various practices of meditation were taught. And the teachings and the practices were given in, hundreds of different ways, depending on the temperament of the person and the people that he was talking with. And I mean, for me, where my meditation began, meditation was brought to Western white American Buddhists in the US about 40 years ago or so, and retreat centers like Insight Meditation Center in Barrie and Spirit Rock in Woodacre and Seattle Insight and Sacramento Insight and Common Ground Meditation in Minnesota, the various ones that were forming, in the 80s or so. They generally brought the teachings of Bhavana, the teaching of meditation first. Because as Westerners, we like to accomplish things. So we want to learn something. We want to learn meditation. And it's been only in the last decade or so that many have begun to really understand the importance of Dharma and Sila laid out first as the foundation, as taught more traditionally by Asian practitioners, coming first rather than the practice of meditation coming first. And so Dharma, at its most basic level, the term is defined as generosity. And in the Buddhist tradition, the giving freely without expecting anything in return. The act of giving is purely out of compassion or goodwill or the desire for someone else's well-being. And perhaps Dharma is more about who we are than what we do. And through generosity, we cultivate a generous spirit. Generosity of spirit will usually lead to generosity of action. And being a generous person is more important than any particular act of giving. After all, it's possible to give without it being a generous act. The Buddha understood giving to be a powerful source of merit, with long-term benefits, both in this life and in lives to come. And while teachings on merit don't carry much meaning for many modern Dharma practitioners, these teachings suggest unseen pathways by which consequences of our actions return to us. Dana isn't meant to be obligatory or done reluctantly. Rather, dana should be performed when the giver is delighted before, during, and after the giving, as it was said in the suttas. Delighted, it's a way of delight, before, during, and after giving. The Buddha emphasized joy of giving. And although giving for the purposes of helping others is an important part of the motivation and joy of giving, the Buddha considered giving for the purpose of attaining nibbana, giving for the purpose of attaining freedom as the highest motivation. And it's interesting to try to decipher in some of the suttas that for this purpose, one gives gifts to adorn and beautify the mind. Now, what does that really mean? Amongst these adornments of the mind are non-clinging, not hanging on, loving kindness, and the concern for well-being of others. So we're giving to ourselves when we're practicing the act of dana. In Joseph Goldstein's book, that fabulous book on mindfulness, he has a section in there on the practice of generosity. And he mentions the two ways of understanding generosity. One, which we know very well, is a spontaneous and natural expression of an open mind and heart. It's when we're connected wholeheartedly with others and the world. And it's not a matter of deciding to give. Giving simply flows out of us. This type of generosity is, for example, the generosity of a parent with their child. And the second way of understanding generosity is as a practice itself, which we can begin, even though it may not automatically be flowing out of us. We can engage in the practice itself of generosity. And the practice has two important parts. First, it helps connect us with others and with ourselves. Giving creates a relationship between the giver and the receiver. So acts of generosity help us to learn more about the nature of our relationships. It also develops those relationships. Practicing generosity together with meditation practice, when we get to the Bhavana part, but practicing generosity with meditation helps ensure that our spiritual practice doesn't occur aloof from others. If we practice just meditation without generosity, we can not need to develop those relationships and we can seem aloof. So the second important part is through the practice of generosity, we begin to understand where we're closed and where we're holding back, where we feel our fear. We learn what keeps us from being generous. And we can take on the practice to see where we resist. Dana is a mindfulness practice. Mindful awareness brings the active dana out of the realm of unconscious habit and into the realm of wise attention. So, for example, we can become aware of the joy that arises in the heart before giving. We can know the happiness during the actual moment of letting go. Because dana is a practice, we can also become mindful when we feel the suffering of attachment and the painful part of letting go. It's interesting. I noticed that when I increased the amount of giving that I gave to homeless people on the street when I was stopped at stop signs and stoplights and stuff. I always gave them $2, maybe $3. And then I decided $2 or $3 doesn't do very much. I can let go of $5. And so I started pulling all together my ones and my fives out of my wallet and sticking them under my dashboard cover. And I noticed the interesting thing of when I started giving $5 bills, and that there was this beginning sort of attachment of not wanting to let go. But then the act of the generosity of the dana, the joy that I felt also at the giving, and the joy that I saw at the receiving, and then the joy afterward of that letting go. It's really a practice. And sometimes just noticing the suffering of the attachment and that painful part of letting go really brings it into our mindfulness practice. And, in a moment of mindful giving, the heart is filled with the beautiful qualities of the mind, of non-greed, non-hatred, non-delusion. As one teacher put it, practicing dana is letting go of greed. And it's helpful to frequently reflect on the ways generosity benefits the receiver, but at the same time, it deepens our own practice of compassion and wisdom, which leads step by step to complete liberation. Through helping others, we're also helping ourselves and benefiting the larger community. I think this quote from Walt Whitman kind of addresses this in an interesting way. Do not be discouraged. Keep on. There are divine things well enveloped. I swear to you, there are divine things more beautiful than words can tell. And I think this idea of embracing dana as a practice, it really opens us up to the divine things. It opens us up to even things like the Brahma Viharas of understanding kindness and compassion and joy and equanimity in a really deep, real way. These divine things that are more beautiful than words can tell. So, taking a deep breath on that part around dana, I'm going to move on to Sila. living an ethical life, harmonious living. Ethical conduct, or Sila, is built on this vast concept of universal love and compassion for all living beings, on which the Buddha's teaching is based. The Buddha gave his teaching for the good of the many, for the happiness of the many, and out of compassion for the world. And so amongst the very first teachings that the Buddha offered to his students that would provide this foundation for the entirety of the Buddha's training were the guidelines for ethical living, known as the 5 precepts. The Buddha knew that applying them to your thoughts, your words, your actions every day, no matter how challenging they may be, is a sure way to improve your life by helping to resolve much of the emotional struggle and stress that cloud the mind. I think I'll repeat that. Among the very first teachings the Buddha offered to his students that would provide a foundation for the entirety of the Buddhist training were the guidelines for ethical living, known as the 5 precepts. The Buddha knew that applying them to your thoughts, words, and actions every day, no matter how challenging they may be, is a sure way to improve your life by helping to resolve much of the emotional struggle and stress that cloud the mind. The precepts are integral to the Buddha's path of practice, the Noble Eightfold Path, which guides the practice of virtue alongside the development of the mental discipline and the wisdom of Bhavana, of meditation. So that's the third part of this talk, which I'm not going to talk about today. It's going to be another episode 2. But the precepts are usually recited, as we have heard before. There's various interpretations and translations of them, some more modern, some more arcane, but basically refraining from taking life, refraining from stealing and taking what isn't freely given, refraining from illicit sexual conduct. This includes sex with people who are already married or in relationships, as well as with minors and any other kind of sex that causes harm to oneself or others. And to refrain from unskillful speech, including telling lies, gossiping, and speaking harshly. And to abstain from taking intoxicants that cause heedlessness and cloud the mind. And if we take up one of the precepts and try it for a day or for a week, we can really begin to personalize it and, see more deeply into, the nature of when I might tell a lie or when I feel I'm probably gossiping, but really it sort of seems necessary, but is it or not? Or, the speaking harshly. The Buddhists taught so much about unskillful speech. But anyway, a lot can be said about each individual precept and how living with them helps cut away the complications and entanglements and the resulting suffering that we make up ourselves. And, even it was a lot in the Buddha's time, even people who don't feel ready to meditate or take on other aspects of Buddhist practices can begin with the precepts and see positive change in their circumstances and state of mind right away. And we can do that in this day and age. And, even people that might not really be drawn to meditating. Somebody asked me today what to do because she said she just couldn't sit and meditate. She had to meditate some other way besides sitting. And so this idea that just taking on a precept can have a positive change in our circumstance and our state of mind. Sometimes it's recommended to start with a single precept, like the pledge to refrain from lying, and practicing with that for a period of time. That can get kind of tricky, How subtle are some of our lies, or lying to ourselves about something? When can we really see that's happening, or can we really see it? This Thai Buddhist master Achan Phuong Judiko once said, if you can't control your mouth, how can you ever learn to control your mind? That's rather harsh, but hey, if you can't control your mouth, how can you ever learn to control your mind? So I've started thinking about that when, like, my mouth starts doing a lot quickly without my mind actually noticing that, some of the things I might have said were inappropriate or unnecessary. And I go, uh-oh, one of the ways I can learn to control my mind might be to control my mouth. And, for most of us, that's a sufficiently challenging place to begin. So in ethical conduct, Sila, which is based on love and compassion, it's interesting to note that the three factors of the Noble Eightfold Path, three of them, right speech, right action, and right livelihood, are all included in this Sila category. And we can sort of notice right speech, right action, right livelihood. Renunciation sort of comes in, that if we can restraint can facilitate peace and concentration of mind. And it can be represented by the ancient verse, one of the verses from the Dhammapada, not to commit wrongful deeds, but to practice good deeds, and to keep the heart pure. This is the teaching of the Buddha. Not to commit wrongful deeds, but to practice good deeds, and to keep the heart pure. This is the teaching of the Buddha. And to keep the heart pure really means to try to keep the mind uncluttered. It doesn't mean that we are saintly. It means that we're reasonably aware, reasonably caring, open to ourselves and to others, and not influenced by hatred, greed, or delusion. And so that idea of restraint, like when I see something coming up that might be sort of harmful to myself, can I restrain from going that direction in the thinking? Not to mention, deeds, actual deeds, or speaking, actually saying things out loud. But the idea of restraint facilitating peace and concentration, and that keeping the heart pure by trying to keep the mind uncluttered. Achan Moon expounds the virtues of moral conduct in a book that's written by Mei Chi. I think you might have read it. She's the enlightened laywoman, and in it, I think it's called The Unentangled Knowing. That's one of them that I quote from sometimes. And he explained, and this is a serious monk conversation but she was a lay person, and she also was very hardcore in her practice. So what he's saying in her book, she's writing in her book, he explained that the moral virtue gained by consistently observing the 5 precepts as the foundation for being a decent human being. Each of the 5 precepts carries a particular benefit. And I really like this. By refraining from harming living creatures, we can expect to enjoy good health and longevity. By refraining from stealing, our wealth and property will be safe from theft and misfortune. By refraining from adultery, partners will be faithful toward each other and live contentedly without feeling guilt or shame. By refraining from lying, we will always be trusted and respected for our integrity. By refraining from intoxicants, we will guard our intelligence and remain bright, knowledgeable people who are not easily misguided or thrown into confusion. People who maintain a high level of moral virtue tend to reassure living beings everywhere by conveying a sense of contentment and mutual trust, and by promoting this feeling in others. I really like that part. The supportive and protective power of morality ensures rebirth into higher realms of existence. So those who adhere to high moral standards will surely reach a heavenly destination in their next life. We each have the ability to practice and develop ourselves in this life. Whether we reach complete liberation or simple peace and happiness in this moment, the doors are open for us and the teachings are there. By practicing generosity and harmonious living, we have the ability of heart and mind that's needed to open to more subtle states as the hindrances fall away. And so as we study the Buddha's teachings and put those teachings into practice, our lives change. Practicing Dhamma principles, the 3 pillars of the Dhamma, the generosity, or the 5 precepts, following the Noble Eightfold Path. So those are, right in there is Dana, Sila, and Bhavana. The generosity of Dana, the 5 precepts of Sila, and the Eightfold Path of Bhavana brings greater happiness and security into our lives. And we develop the ability to face life's challenges with more skill and patient endurance. There it is again, patience and endurance. So I'll close with this one quote from one of the suttas. By giving this gift, my heart will be glad, and happiness and joy will arise in me. One gives because it ennobles and adorns the mind, ennobling and adorning the mind. So let's sit for a few minutes and let some of those words settle and see what might have come up that seemed interesting or useful, but let's just take a few moments and let the words settle down. May we know that generosity is not only a radiant manifestation of our own metta practice, but it also allows teachers to offer the Buddha's teachings that awaken the hearts of others. And as the Buddha taught us, we practice to radiate kindness all over the world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths. Thank you for your kind attention in listening to the Dhamma and in applying your mind to contemplate these wisdom teachings. May it bring you joy, and may that joy fill your heart and be felt by others. What was that last quote from him about? Where is it? People who maintain a high level of moral virtue tend to reassure living beings everywhere by conveying a sense of contentment and mutual trust, and by promoting this feeling in others. May we radiate that to others that we come into contact with.